The toll of this global horror only gets harder to capture, but here's a fact that graphically spells out the ruthless speed of this pandemic and its devastating impact. More people have died in New York in the last day than in nearly the whole of March. The state's death toll doubling since Tuesday to more than 3,000. And tonight, new hotspots erupting across the country with still no national strategy or unified defense plan. But here in the epicenter, the plea for help is piercing in its urgency. And with our team in place, New York is where we start tonight with Gabe Gutierrez.
This is the emergency room inside Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. Doctors now call it a battle zone.
Everyone that's in here today is here due to breathing problems, almost uniformly all from COVID.
Tonight, growing anger from the nation's coronavirus epicenter.
We are afraid for our patients, we are afraid for our families, we are afraid for our lives.
At another hospital, these nurses are calling it a daily suicide mission with a lack of PPE, personal protective equipment.
This is life or death. Every hospital in the state of New York and across the United States should have the supplies they need.
Governor Andrew Cuomo has now signed an executive order allowing the state and the National Guard to take ventilators and PPE from hospitals that have too much and redistribute them to those who need it most.
Am I willing to deploy the National Guard and inconvenience people for several hundred lives? You're damn right I am.
The mayor is urging New Yorkers to cover their faces when going outside to keep them from spreading the virus to others. Now, an urgent scramble to find more critical hospital beds. With the massive Javits Convention Center changing course and now taking COVID-19 patients, there are mounting calls for the U.S. naval ship Comfort to do the same. So far, the 1,000-bed ship has treated only about 20 patients. Still, as the battle against the virus rages, there's a show of solidarity. Firefighters and EMTs cheering on their fellow soldiers, the overwhelmed doctors and nurses on the front lines, police officers delivering food.
Probably the busiest I've ever had to work or ever seen the hospital.
Dr. Joshua Davis works in an ICU.
It's really hard. Being able to be physically with a patient and their family during their biggest time of need is something that makes it easier for me and for many people to have to give bad news. And so to have to do this over the phone or over Skype and things like that, without physical proximity is really difficult.
The death toll today in the tri-state region topped 3,500. Among them, Frank Bocabella, a TSA officer at Newark, Sandra Santos Vizcaíno, a third-grade teacher in Brooklyn.
Nobody loves you like your mom, so that's going to be the biggest thing.
Shoshana Davis was just 35, passionate about travel. She's survived by her 3-year-old daughter and husband, who will never forget the last time they spoke.
She squeezed my hand almost in a pattern that felt like she was saying, "I love you" back. So I knew that she'd at least heard me, and that somewhere inside she knew that.
Governor Cuomo says that more than 20,000 out-of-state medical volunteers have signed up to help. But late today, an emergency alert rang on phones throughout New York, urgently asking for more. Lester?
All right, Gabe, thank you. And tonight, a major shift in the guidance on how to protect yourself through all this. The CDC now saying people should use cloth face coverings when going outside. It comes as the virus rapidly spreads. Confirmed cases in this country now surpassing 250,000, with 7,000 dead. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
Amid scenes like these across the country, tonight the Coronavirus Task Force is now asking all Americans to voluntarily wear non-medical face coverings while out in public, the bold step announced by the president a short time ago.
They can be either purchased online or simply made at home. These face coverings can be easily washed or reused. I want to emphasize that the CDC is not recommending the use of medical-grade or surgical-grade masks.
The new layer of protection is no substitute for social distancing, but it comes after the CDC added talking to its list of how the coronavirus spreads person to person, as some funeral homes and cemeteries struggle to keep pace with the skyrocketing number of fatalities. Tonight, there is growing concern over exploding hotspots. In states like Michigan, Massachusetts, Louisiana, and New Jersey, tens of thousands of new cases are flooding emergency rooms.
It's very hard hard because, my brother, he died alone.
In hard-hit South Florida, 34-year-old Brandon Robinson went to the hospital and never came home.
We couldn't see him at the hospital, and we found out just by calling in that, he had passed.
With the National Guard in states like Montana taking the temperature of arriving passengers at airports and train stations, there is a stronger push for all states to implement stay-at-home orders.
For Nebraska, this is the right plan.
But several governors, like Nebraska's, are refusing to do so. In states like Arizona and Florida, golf courses are still considered essential services, while in Texas, churches can keep their doors open. But in Dallas, the sheriff shut down the Hobby Lobby before the national chain agreed to close all stores by tonight.
It's a slap in the face to the businesses that are following this order that a few outliers are putting the community in danger.
As Michigan gets set to fine residents $1,000 for failing to comply with social distancing orders.
This coronavirus is for real.
In Detroit, bus driver Jason Hargrove warned of passengers not covering their mouths when coughing. After contracting the virus, Hargrove is now among the heartbreaking list of public servants who died while likely becoming infected on the job. In Southern California today, a second procession in as many days after 2 deputies passed away after contracting the virus. The families of those taking the greatest risk for public good, often paying the highest toll. But tonight, there are also stories of inspiration.
Feel good. Feel real good today.
At 104 years old, Bill Lapshys survived World War II, the Spanish flu, and is now likely become the oldest American to beat the coronavirus, a symbol of hope for a country in need of just that. Tonight, the White House stressed Americans should not go out and buy medical or surgical masks that are in short supply, but should instead fashion their own face coverings from homemade items. Lester?
All right, Miguel, thanks very much. The Navy says at least 137 sailors aboard the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt have tested positive amid growing criticism over the firing of the ship's captain, who pleaded for help to stop the outbreak. NBC's Courtney Cubie on the extraordinary scene as the captain left his ship.
The Navy may have fired Captain Brett Crozier, but his sailors would not let him go quietly. Chanting his name, sailors swarmed to say goodbye to Crozier, who sounded the alarm about a growing coronavirus outbreak on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Before departing, Crozier turned to wave farewell. Earlier this week, he begged Navy leaders to help the ship's crew in a letter first reported by the San Francisco Chronicle. "We are not at war," he wrote. "Sailors do not need to die." Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Modly says Crozier sent the letter to multiple people on an unclassified server rather than going directly to his leadership.
To me, that demonstrated extremely poor judgment in the middle of a crisis. Because what it's done, it's created a firestorm.
But critics say Crozier was dismissed for speaking out and trying to protect his sailors.
The administration is not going to be able to fire their way out of this problem.
In a statement to NBC News, a group of sailors on board the aircraft carrier agreed, saying Secretary Modly has turned a military crisis operation into a political reprisal, adding that Captain Crozier has the full faith and confidence of this crew. In an interview today, Acting Secretary Modly called firing Crozier the hardest thing he's ever had to do. Lester?
All right. Courtney, thank you. There was new evidence today of the alarming toll on the American workforce as businesses cut more jobs last month than any time since the Great Recession. Here's Jolene Kent with that.
Tonight, the economic crisis is spiraling. After 10 years of consistent job growth, the U.S. lost more than 700,000 jobs in March. Jonathan Bauer and his wife Alicia lost their restaurant jobs in rural Idaho.
That's our month-to-month, week-to-week, how we pay our expenses and how we live our lives.
Unemployment rising to 4.4%, the biggest month-to-month uptick since 1975. But that doesn't capture the full magnitude of this crisis. The survey for the March jobs report was taken from the 8th to the 14th. It wasn't until the 19th that these statewide stay-at-home orders started going into effect, shutting down cities and towns across the country, and before scores of companies began layoffs.
Now we're seeing the unemployment rate go up rapidly overnight. The underlying unemployment rate today is probably already 10%, if not higher.
Pierce Fleming had already laid off most of his workers at Common House Ale Works in South Carolina, now only offering takeout.
We've seen a 92% drop.
He has a loan payment due tomorrow and is paying his remaining employees out of his own pocket. To survive financially, Fleming needs help from the new federal Paycheck Protection Program.
If we do not get something deferring that loan payment, I will have to have some really tough decisions about what we need to do to continue to shed costs to try and keep the business.
Two of Fleming's banks tell him they weren't ready to open applications when the program launched today, despite assurances from the Treasury Department on the eve of the launch.
As I spoke to all the CEOs yesterday, I've been assured that the banks will be in the process starting tomorrow.
The aid program getting off to a chaotic start for the businesses and the banks.
The lenders didn't get the rules from the Treasury Department until last night. That's why so many of the banks couldn't participate today. Everyone has the best of intentions, but this is $350 billion up for grabs. It takes some time.
Late today, the White House says $3.5 billion of small business loans have been processed so far.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.